Hi guys, welcome back to Prospect Channel TV. Thank you for always coming out here. May God bless you all. With the way we are going currently in Nigeria, very soon people will not be talking about court again. If you get issue, you go one juju, make them decide your matter for you. With what is happening in Rivers State, Nigerians are really disturbed. Do we still have constitution in Nigeria? Abeg, make una watch this video because this video go make you really shed tears for this country. Which way, Nigeria?
What's your comment on the Supreme Court judgment on Rivers State government?
You know, thank God for education. Thank God for knowledge. People do not understand that there is a difference between law and rule of law. In Nigeria, we keep churning out laws every day. Nigeria is not lacking in laws. We have laws everywhere. More laws than even America, than any of those countries. But what we don't have is rule of law. And it's unfortunate. So when people call court, and they say rule of law, sorry, no. The court does not give you rule of law. The court gives you law. It is only when the law, because the courts give law because decided cases are part of our hierarchy of laws. Decided cases give us the legal principle that come out from a case. That is ratio decidenda. The decision of the court becomes part of the court. The judges are not there to make laws. The judges are there to interpret the laws. So rule of law can only be possible if the judges interpret the laws according to the wordings of the law. So anything that is their decision is law. But it can only be rule of law when the decision accords to the wordings of the law. When the courts use their own discretion to give judgment not in accordance with the wordings of the law, that is still law, because by our law any decision of the court is law. But that's not rule of law, because it will not be capable of performing the functions of law, which is principally to ensure orderliness in the society. For anything to become rule of law is not a system of government. Rule of law is an effective exercise, or a more effective or more better way to exercise authority. So rule of law is the effective implementation, interpretation of the law to ensure that the law performs the function of the law, which is orderliness of the society. So before the law can perform the functions of the law must accord to the basic principles. Basic principles. There are certain basic principles the law must conform to in order to be possible that that law will perform the function of the law. If the law does not conform to those basic principles, the law will not be effective enough to become rule of law. What are these principles? They are as enunciated by Longfuller. They are the 8 desiderata of the principles of law. These principles of law include: 1, the law must be expressed in general terms. In other words, the law must apply to everybody without respect to the person. Everybody must be equal to the law. Everybody must be equal before the law, under the law, without discrimination. 2, the law must be publicly promulgated. There is no in a democracy especially, there's no room for any law to be done secretly. You have heard at times the legislature will do something, you heard that it is smuggled. It is that may be law, but it will not be rule of law, because if the people do not know what the law is, they can't obey it. 3, the law must be prospective. It cannot be retrospective, because you cannot command a man today to do something yesterday. It's impossible. So the law cannot be retroactive. It can only be prospective. 4, the law must be expressed in understandable terms. It must be clear. It must be unambiguous. 5, the law must be consistent with each other. Not coming to section 1 and say something, and coming to section 10 and say a contradictory thing. The Supreme Court must be consistent in their judgments, not giving a judgment in this case, and in another case, they are contradicting themselves. Because one of the principles of law that can make the law to achieve rule of law is that it must be consistent with each other. The next, the law must not require a conduct that is beyond the capacities of the affected parties. When a law gives or requires a conduct that is impossible to achieve, that law can never conduce to rule of law. Because we are human beings, we are limited. Then the law must be administered in accordance with the wordings of the law. I hope I've mentioned about 8 of them. The question now is, in all honesty, would you say that the Supreme Court judgments have been consistent with each other? My respectful answer is, I don't think so. The Supreme Court that said that the Plateau State House of Assembly is properly constituted by 6 members because the remaining of the other members have defected, it's still the same Supreme Court I'm hearing saying that it is an absurdity that a governor presented a budget before a 4-man House of Assembly when it was obvious that the other 27 have defected. The law is there by the Supreme Court. And if law are not consistent, they said it will be difficult for that law to perform the functions of law, which is bringing orderliness in the society. The other principle, the last one, which is the 8th one, is that the law should not be changed so regularly to make the subject not to be able to rely on them. You know, you have a law today. Tomorrow you say you have another law. Next tomorrow you say you have another law. That means when I sit down to plan what I will do tomorrow, I won't know what the position of the law is. So one of the 8, which is the final one, is that the law should be constant. The law should be constant, at least over a long time. So they even said that Wike at a certain point had 6 members of the House of Assembly. I'm not aware any court of law said it was an absurdity. You have to apply the law equally to everybody. You don't have to be changing the law every day. The law will not contradict each other. The law must be clear and unambiguous so that rule of law can prevail. So the reason we have too many laws in Nigeria and we are not orderly in Nigeria is because we don't have rule of law. And that confusion permeates all the arms of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. So my reaction to the Supreme Court judgment is, first of all, the position of the law is that Supreme Court judgment is final and should be obeyed by every person and authority in Nigeria. That is the law. So I am not in anywhere in this interview advocating that the Supreme Court judgment should not be obeyed. No. But we are trained as a lawyer. You can agree or disagree and put your points over respectfully. Now, the summary of the judgment is that the governor ought not to have presented the Appropriation Act to the 4 members, but ought to have presented it to the 27 members. Then that's the election conducted by this Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission. The local government election is invalid. This is the ratio from what I gathered. So what it means is that the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission should go and organize another election. That's just what it means. So I heard some people throwing the arguments that there was one extension by the legislature extending the tenure of the former local government chairman, extending. What did I say about rule of law? That was a legislative exercise of an executive function, and that is illegal. That's treasonable. What it is, what they are saying is like the National Assembly have the right, when we are not in a state of war, to extend the tenure of Tinubu without election. That's what they're saying. Can you see how absurd that is? The court has even struck down that portion of the something, if I can remember, as illegal. Because the legislature, you are saying you are for rule of law, and that's why I'm telling you that none of them is for rule of law. And you're saying that the legislature sat down and made law and excluded the Rivers State people from electing their leaders in a democracy, and you say you want to continue. Why didn't you go to court to mandate the governor to organize? And it's not even the governor that organizes election. It's the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission. They are supposed to be independent. So why didn't you go to court to compel them to organize election? But you went to, and you say they have extended your tenure. No. When your tenure finishes, you hand over. If there is no elected person to hand over, then you hand over to the highest civil servant in that office to take charge until an election is done. You cannot replace an illegality with another illegality. I remember saying that I am not in support of Fubara then choosing a caretaker committee because it will be illegal. That the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission must organize an election. So they have organized an election. The Supreme Court said no, they didn't follow certain procedure. So what they should just do is to go and organize another election. And then those things the Supreme Court pointed out, they will now make amends to it. And then the Rivers State will have the people of their choice governing them. So saying that the legislature extended the tenure of the guy, it's treasonable. Because elected people who have tenure, now I'm telling you, another elected people who have tenure, they are extending their tenure. No, if that law is allowed to stand, what it means is that the legislature can sit down and say that they are extending their own tenure and that they can no longer leave when their own tenure is over. So they will stay put. Because you are setting a precedent. And like I told you about principles of law, when you establish a law, it has to be constant. It has to be consistent with one another. So that, for me, is a legal blasphemy. There is nothing like extension of tenure. The former local government chairman, their tenure ended, expired, and has ended. So what the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission should do is to go back, conduct a fresh election, and have the local government chairman installed by democracy. Now, the other part of it is saying that something should be represented. Well, they will sit down and look at the details of the Supreme Court judgment and obey it. But the issue of the defection has not been treated by the Supreme Court. You can't infer. Courts and their decisions are done on issue by issue basis. If I recall, when they went to Omotosho, because that was where the case started, the issue was the appropriation bill, the appropriation law, whether it was legal to be presented to 4 members or 27 members. And the court said it shouldn't have been presented to the 4 members. Of course, I disagree with the judgment, citing the earlier Supreme Court judgment of the Plateau State and citing the fact that laws should not contradict each other, should be consistent with one another. That's what you call judicial precedent. and citing the principle of law that will make it to be able to perform the function of law, a law should be constant. I disagree with the judgment. But that does not mean that the 27 members have retained their seat, because the law is very clear. When you defect, you lose your seat. Section 109 1G. And these lawmakers defected, swore an affidavit that they have defected. Affidavit is one of the greatest instruments of law, because you swore. You can go to jail if you come and admit that you lied, because that's perjury. It's there in the court. The mere idea that they are denying that they did not defect meant an admission that they now realize that defection meant they are losing their seat. Courts check all these things. So the mere idea that they are denying they did not defect is a conclusive evidence that they know that when you defect, you lose your seat. So they have defected and they have lost their seat by law. And the court needed not to give an order before the defection is complete, because the court was not mentioned in that procedure that their seat will be vacant. So in my own opinion, in the eyes of the law, they are not members of the Rivers State House of Assembly. And the Supreme Court has not ruled on that, to my knowledge. And as long as that has not been ruled on, there's still a sword of Damocles hanging over their neck. And if we are a people that respect rule of law, meaning implementing the law, effective exercise of the law, giving life to the law, so that the law will be able to perform its functions of orderliness in the society, maintaining social order, then they are no longer members of the Rivers State House of Assembly. And any court that rules otherwise has destroyed the fabrics of the principles of law, which will not conduce to orderliness in a society. So I plead with my judiciary learned jurists, because I'm a minister in the temple of justice, and I have the duty to uphold the rule of law, that when they are giving judgment, they should please look at these principles and give judgments that are consistent with one another, that is clear, unambiguous, that does not admit a conduct that is impossible. How can you tell, for instance, a governor, for instance, that 2024 budget he has to go and represent it? That's an impossibility, because you are commanding him today to do something yesterday. It's impossible. It's against the principle of law that brings orderliness in society. So I'm appealing to them, whenever they want to make any case law, they should look at the principles of law and make sure that their decision accords with these principles, so that it can engineer orderliness in society. We don't have order in Rivers State because we don't have rule of law. The courts are giving mixed signals and mixed messages, very ambiguous, that is difficult to understand. Why am I saying this? Are you giving an impression that when somebody defects, he still holds his seat? Are you giving a signal that if somebody defects and a governor is now acting with the remainder of the House of Assembly members, are you sending a signal the governor is wrong? These are mixed messages, because the laws are clear. So for now, we don't have rule of law in this country, because our laws are not according to the principles that will make it possible for the principles to achieve the functions of law, which the principle one is to maintain social order. But what's going on in Rivers State is unfortunate. Let me talk about the Wike angle, because when those people were rejoicing, I saw them and I was really very ashamed seeing that people are rejoicing that the statutory allocation meant for their state is being cut off. So their intention is not the welfare of the Rivers people, because they are the ones that will be affected. Their intention is, once it satisfies their quest for power and resources, if the Rivers people want to go and die, they can go and die. I was really ashamed, because this is like the woman who went to King Solomon and told King Solomon to divide the child. Let her take one part. Let the other woman take one part. Because it's not her child. She knows that the child will die. So if River State dies, provided they get their own part of the cake, they don't mind. That's why they can unashamedly be rejoicing that the court said that statutory allocation will be denied their own people. Now let's talk about the issue of statutory allocation. I will tell you why I disagree with that judgment. First of all, by section 66B of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the power of the courts extends to the determination of civil rights and obligations of persons and of government and persons. Determination of the civil rights. The court cannot go and start punishing a people or even a party in a civil proceeding without first of all determining their civil rights. That is why what the court does is to rule on the legality or otherwise of presenting the appropriation bill and then expect the parties to obey. It is when the parties do not obey that you go further in a procedure which we call the enforcement of judgment. It is in that enforcement of judgment that you can bring penalty against somebody because not obeying court order is contempt of court. You can't go and start punishing Rivers people, punishing a governor that has not treated your judgment or order in contempt. What you as a court is supposed to do is to determine the civil rights and obligations of the governor, the legislature, as it regards the issues presented to you, and tell them, Governor, this is what you should do, legislature, this is what you should do. It stops there. Then if the governor does not do it, that's when you will say the governor is contemptuous of the courts. And then when the other party now brings a procedure for contempt of court, that's when you can now punish whichever party that did not obey it. That has not been done. And inside your judgment, where you are supposed to determine the civil rights and obligation of the parties, you are including punishment that will even result in punishing the people. For me, the aim of judgment is to give justice. I wonder how that will conduce justice to Rivers people, to a governor that everybody knows is peaceful and obeys the law. The court ought to have just told the governor, no, this is your civil right. No, this is your obligation. No, you exceeded your rights here. This is what you should do. And I know this governor, because when this governor came in first, at the risk of giving up all his rights, he said, for in the interest of peace, he is willing to do anything. The Supreme Court would have just given that judgment and the governor would have obeyed. Why say you are cutting the statutory allocation to the people? You're punishing the people already, punishing the governor, when you have not given the governor the right to voluntarily obey your judgment. Because all through this while, the case have been in court, so you can't say the governor is in contempt. This is the final court of the land. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court acted as if they were in a criminal proceeding, where they started attaching punishment to what ordinarily should be the determination of the civil rights and obligation of the parties. That is what section 66B of the Constitution said. If a government is quarreling with a person, or a person is quarreling with the government, they go to court. The court determines their civil rights and obligation, and they are expected to willingly obey the law. You don't attach punishment, because it's not a criminal proceeding. It is when they refuse to obey the law that you now begin to attach punishment, because contempt of the law is now an offense. How do you begin to punish Rivers people? Punish the parties before you, withholding these things, without first of all giving them the opportunity to obey. Look, even in political issues, the court has recognized that the politicians have the right to settle their issues politically. And I give you an example. When Obasanjo was in power, there was a judgment the federal government got in favor of the federal government against the littoral states, where the government proved that their sovereignty does not extend beyond their land borders. Obasanjo knew he was going to be a problem because some of the states, most of their resources come from offshore. Obasanjo opted despite the decision of the Supreme Court. That's why I said law alone may not give you orderliness in society. So you have to go to the rule of law. Obasanjo went into negotiation and they agreed on certain percentage that will be paid to those littoral states from the money that they get from offshore, Bayelsa principally. And some people still went to court and said, no, this was not the decision of the Supreme Court. The decision of the Supreme Court is simple. The Supreme Court said, no, this is a democracy. Politics is allowed. They can settle, politically. That if they settle politically, so be it. It happened in Nigeria. So why would the Supreme Court not give the parties even the option to know whether they can settle politically? You're destroying the fabrics of society, destroying the fabrics of orderliness. That is not the aim of law. The aim of law is for social order. So I expected the Supreme Court to simpliciter determine the civil rights and obligation of the parties before them. We've not had any precedent like this before. It's a recondite issue of law. So when they decide it, all the parties are expected to obey. It is when the parties do not obey that you begin to go to the next stage, which is enforcement of the law. That's when the Supreme Court would have now said, okay, you did not obey us, you're contemptuous of the court. We are now saying they will not do this for you, they will not do this for you. Even when the federal government, under this administration, by the Attorney General of the Federation, went to court and they said they will be transmitting the money directly to the local government fund because of certain bureaucratic things that needed to be straightened out. Even if the federal government is not able to do it, it's going to a year. They got the judgment. And they are trying to sort it out. The federal government has not come out to say the governors are not obeying. The federal government said they are trying to sort it out. Are they in contempt of the court? Strictly, yes. But the court allows them because they know this is politics, this is administration, that they use their own methods to see whether they can sort themselves out. It is when they cannot sort themselves out that the party can go back to court and say, these people do not want to obey your law. Then that's when the court will now enforce the law. Why is the Rivers own case different? No. I disagree with certain things about the judgment. But like I said, they are a final court. They should be obeyed. But the courts will realize that their judgments are not conducing to orderliness in society, to justice, and making the law to perform its functions. And if they continue like this, they may unwittingly bring anarchy to the people.
Your comment to the passing of Pa Adebajo and that of Pa Edwin Clark.
It was a sad day for Nigeria. It would have been a beautiful day for Nigeria if these men lived to see what they were fighting for. If they had lived to see the great Nigeria they fought for, the Nigeria of equity, justice and fairness. The truth is that they died complaining that they cannot see it. I heard that when Edwin Clark was dying, that's what I heard. I was not an eyewitness. He was sympathetic to Fubara, still mentioning how they must not allow Fubara to go down in injustice. You can imagine. These are men, 90-something years, nonagenarians, fighting for a society. They could not enter that promised land they were fighting for. That is what made me sad. I remember when we did our campaign in Ibadan, I saw how Adebanjo was climbing the step. You know, when you see them on TV, you still think they have all the energy. I saw the will, the strength, and I knew what kept these people alive. He was climbing the step. It was difficult for him, but he was climbing it until he made it to the top. Looking for justice, looking for a Nigeria of the dream they had when they were youths. Because when they were born, obviously they must have been born into colonialism. They saw it. Nigeria became independent. In their adult age, they saw it. They saw the gradual decay and decline of Nigeria. They saw it. And they continued fighting even in their age. So the only thing that is sad about their passing is that they didn't see that Nigeria that they wished for, prayed for, worked for, and fought for. But apart from that, they are men well blessed. Blessed in children, blessed in wealth, blessed in riches, blessed in long life. So they were not fighting for themselves. They were fighting for us and for the next generation. My prayer, let that dream they have of a great Nigeria come to fruition in my lifetime. May their souls rest in peace, and may their memory be a blessing. It was a loss for Nigeria, but it was a life well spent. I've told you the only.
All right, guys, thank you very much for staying, to the end of this video. So what's your take on this? Please, let's hear from you. Drop your comment below the comment section. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Share this video, make it go viral. Let Nigerians understand what is happening today in the Nigerian political landscape. Thank you. See you next in my next video.